They mocked the humble woman's quiet piano playing until the arrogant pianist's challenge turned into a lesson he never saw coming. Ryan was not an ordinary pianist. He was young, confident, and played the piano like fire. Ever since he was a child, people had told him he was gifted. His fingers moved so fast on the keys that it looked like magic. He studied in the best music schools, won competitions, and gathered millions of followers on social media. Whenever he performed, cameras flashed and fans screamed. People called him a genius. And somewhere deep inside, Ryan started believing that no one could ever be better than him. He wore stylish clothes, walked with pride, and always had a slight smirk on his face as if the world already knew how amazing he was. When he played, he didn't just play music, he showed off. He tossed his hair back, hit the keys hard, and ended every performance with a dramatic pose. It was all part of his act, and it worked. People loved it. One day, Ryan was invited to perform at a small-town charity event. He wasn't really interested at first. It was a local concert, not a grand city stage. But his manager convinced him. To go? It's good for your image, he said. Show the world that you care about small places, too. So Ryan agreed, thinking it would be easy attention. When he arrived in the town, everything felt slower, quieter. No big billboards, no shining lights. Just friendly people and simple buildings. He didn't mind it would be an easy win. Would play his usual flashy piece, impress the crowd, take a few pictures, and leave. While waiting backstage before the event, Ryan overheard some people talking. Is Eliza coming tonight? Oh, she never misses the charity concert. Hope she'll play something. You know how magical it feels when she touches the piano? Ryan raised an eyebrow. Eliza, who was that? A volunteer nearby noticed his confused face and smiled. They're talking about Mrs. Eliza. She's a local. She plays the piano at the church. Quiet woman when she plays. You feel something? Ryan chuckled. A church pianist? Said with a laugh. That's sweet. I'm sure she's good for a small town. The volunteer shrugged. You'll see. Later that evening, Ryan met Eliza in person. She was unlike anyone he expected. She wore a simple dress, her gray hair tied back neatly. No makeup, no fancy shoes, no expensive jewelry. She smiled gently and greeted him with respect. Ryan barely nodded. To him, she looked like someone who should be baking pies, not sharing a stage with him. The more people spoke about Eliza, the more Ryan felt annoyed. How could they compare this old, quiet woman to him? He was the star. He had performed in Paris, London, and New York. He had fans screaming his name, and now here he was, being spoken about in the same breath as some local woman who played in a church. During dinner, before the performance, a small crowd gathered around Eliza, asking her about her music, her favorite songs, and her memories. Of playing in the town, Ryan sat at his table, alone, watching. It irritated him. He didn't like being ignored, then he had an idea. As the host made announcements about the evening program, Ryan stood up smiling confidently. Excuse me, he said, holding a microphone. I hear there's a very talented pianist here, Mrs. Eliza Wright. The crowd turned to look at her. She looked surprised, but nodded kindly. I think it would be fun, Ryan continued, if we had a little piano duel tonight. A friendly one, of course. His smile widened. Let's see what happens when new school meets old school. There were murmurs in the crowd. Some smiled. Some looked uncomfortable. Eliza looked unsure. Oh, I don't know, she said softly. I didn't prepare for anything like that. Ryan laughed lightly. Neither did I. That's the point. It's just a little fun between musicians. The room went quiet. People waited for Eliza's response. She looked around, noticed the mixed expressions, and finally smiled. All right, she said, for fun. The crowd clapped, and Ryan grinned. He felt like he had won already. In his mind, this would be easy. He'd play something fast, something loud, maybe throw in a few dramatic moments. Everyone would see how far ahead he was. Backstage, he prepared like a warrior going into battle. He picked his most crowd-pleasing piece, one filled with runs, high-speed sections, and a powerful ending. He even practiced a few hand moves to make it more exciting to watch. Meanwhile, Eliza sat alone near the old upright piano. She didn't practice much. She closed her eyes for a while, her fingers gently resting on the keys. She thought about the song she wanted to play. It wasn't loud, it wasn't showy, but it was deep. It was personal. A song that told a story. A song that meant something to her heart. Some of the younger musicians giggled behind her back. "She's going to get crushed," one whispered. "She won't last 2 minutes," another said. But Eliza heard none of it. She stayed calm, focused, only on the music in her head. Outside, the crowd waited, full of curiosity. They had seen Ryan's videos online. They knew he was amazing. But they had also heard Eliza before, and they remembered how her music made them feel. This would be an interesting night. Ryan looked at himself in the mirror before going on stage. He fixed his collar, ran a hand through his styled hair, and smiled. "This is going to be fun," he whispered. He had no idea what was waiting for him. He didn't know that this quiet, humble woman was about to teach him something. No teacher, no stage, and no spotlight ever had. Because sometimes true power doesn't come from loud applause or fast fingers. Sometimes it comes from silence, grace, and the courage to let your heart speak through music. And tonight, the world would see the difference. Eliza was not used to attention. She lived a quiet life in the town, spending most of her days teaching piano to children, playing hymns in the church, and walking through the park with her little dog. She had never looked for fame, never posted her performances online, and never called herself special. She simply loved music. It was her comfort, her friend, her world. She played not to be praised, but to express what words couldn't say. After Ryan publicly challenged her to a piano duel at the charity concert, Eliza felt nervous inside, though she didn't show it. She didn't like public attention or competition. In fact, she hadn't performed in front of a large crowd in years. But when Ryan smiled at her with that arrogant look, and when the room filled with whispers and curiosity, Eliza felt something stir in her heart, not pride, not anger, but a quiet resolve. She didn't want to prove anything, but she wanted to honor the music she loved. And maybe, just maybe, show that music isn't just about skill, it's about soul. That night, after she returned home, she sat at her old piano. The instrument was slightly worn, the keys a little yellow, but its sound was deep and warm. She didn't need a grand piano or a fancy stage. She touched the keys gently, and the notes filled her small living room like soft light. She didn't rehearse anything flashy. Instead, she played a simple classical piece that had stayed with her since she was young. A piece by Chopin filled with emotion, sorrow, and quiet beauty. She didn't rush through it. She let each note breathe, each pause speak. It was the kind of music that reached deep into a person's chest and made them feel something real as she played. Memories came back to her, her first piano teacher who had told her, "Play with your heart, not just your hands." Her husband, who had loved hearing her play in the evenings before he passed away, the times she had played lullabies to calm crying babies, the times she had played for people in hospital rooms, their eyes closed, their breathing steadying with each note. Music for her was never about winning. It was about healing, connecting, and comforting. The next day, word of the upcoming duel spread across town. Everyone was talking about it. Some were excited to see Ryan perform. Others were curious too. Watch Eliza. A few people tried to tell her not to do it. "Eliza, he's a professional. Don't let him embarrass you. You have nothing to prove. Why put yourself in that position?" But Eliza just smiled gently and said, "I'm not doing it for attention. I just want to play." Meanwhile, Ryan was practicing like it was a championship. He had chosen a fast-paced jazz classical fusion piece, full of complex finger movements and sharp rhythms. He rehearsed every detail, how he would flick his wrist, how he'd lift his hand dramatically, how he'd smile at the crowd after a hard section. For him, this was another stage to dominate, another video clip to go viral. He imagined the headlines already. "City star destroys local pianist in epic duel." In his mind, it was already over. He didn't practice feeling, he practiced flash. Before the concert began, the two pianists crossed paths briefly backstage. Eliza greeted Ryan politely. "Looking forward to hearing you play," she said with a kind tone. Ryan smirked. "You too? Hope you're ready." "I'm always ready for music," she replied, then walked away quietly. Her words confused him for a second. Then he shook his head and went back to warming up his fingers. A few of his friends were in the back, joking. "She's going to freeze up. She probably still uses sheet music." Ryan laughed, but inside something small tugged at him. Just a little doubt, not fear, but curiosity. Why did she seem so calm? Outside, the concert hall was filling up. More people had shown up than usual. Everyone wanted to see the duel between the big star and the humble local. The air buzzed with excitement. Some people were there for the music. Others were there for the drama. No one really knew what was going to happen when Eliza walked on stage briefly to check the piano. A few people clapped politely. She adjusted the bench, pressed a few keys, and smiled at the sound. The piano was in good shape. As she walked off stage, she didn't see the crowd whispering or the cameras being set up. She was thinking only of the music. She closed her eyes and listened to the quiet before the storm. Back in the dressing room, Ryan looked at himself in the mirror again. He liked what he saw. A star, a master, a future legend. Then came the announcement. The host introduced both pianists to loud applause. Ryan was called first. He stood up, flashed a charming smile, and walked to the stage with confidence. As he sat at the piano, he gave one quick look toward Elisa, who stood calmly backstage. Then he turned to the keys and began his performance. The first few notes were fast, sharp, and loud. He flew through the piece with incredible speed. The audience was impressed. Some people started cheering halfway through. His fingers danced across the piano, changing tempos, jumping octaves, showing off technique and energy. It was dazzling, almost like watching fireworks in the night sky. He ended with a high-energy bang and raised his hands with flair. The room exploded with applause. People stood up, clapped, whistled. Someone shouted, "He's unbeatable." Ryan stood, bowed deeply, and walked off stage with a proud look. Now it was Eliza's turn. She walked slowly to the piano. No rush. No smile, just calm, focus. She adjusted the bench, placed her hands on the keys, and looked down for a few seconds. Then she began to play. The first note was soft, almost too soft. People leaned forward to hear better. Then came the next note, and the next. Her fingers moved slowly, carefully, but with deep emotion. It wasn't fast, it wasn't loud, it was beautiful. The kind of beauty that makes people forget to breathe. The music flowed like water, smooth, gentle, and full of feeling. Out. Each note seemed to say something: happiness, loss, hope. Memories. Her music wasn't trying to impress, was telling a story. The room grew quiet. Even the children stopped moving. No one dared to make a sound. It felt like the piano itself was speaking. Eliza didn't move much. She didn't throw her hands in the air. She didn't smile at the crowd. She just played, eyes closed sometimes, like she was somewhere else, somewhere peaceful and far away. When she finished, there was a long silence. No one clapped right away. Then slowly, someone began to clap, then another, and then the whole room stood up and clapped, not with excitement, but with respect, with awe, with emotion. Ryan stood backstage, frozen. He had played with all his might. He had shown every trick, every talent. And yet, it was Eliza's simple, honest playing that had touched the crowd. He realized something he had never understood before. Sometimes music isn't about speed or noise. It's about honesty. It's about emotion. And it's about heart. The concert hall was filled with a strange kind of silence right after Eliza finished her performance. It was not the kind of silence that comes from boredom or confusion. No, it was the kind of silence that follows something powerful, like when a deep truth is spoken, or when people witness something beautiful that they don't know how to respond to. For a few long seconds, nobody moved. Nobody clapped. Even the children in the back, who had been restless earlier, were sitting quietly, as if the music had gently taken hold of their minds and hearts. Then someone stood up and began to clap. Slowly, that soft, respectful clapping grew, first from one side of the hall, then from the other.
Oh.
It was thoughtful, gradual. Then more people stood, and more hands joined in. The applause didn't have the wild energy that Ryan had received. It had something deeper, something more meaningful. Some people wiped their eyes. Others looked at each other, surprised by how deeply they had been moved. Eliza simply stood up from the piano, gave a gentle bow, and walked off the stage without any drama. She didn't smile widely or wave to the crowd. She didn't wait for praise. She had done what she came to do, play with her heart and let the music speak. Backstage, Ryan stood in the corner, frozen. He had watched the entire thing from behind the curtain. When he had performed, the audience had cheered, clapped, and shouted with excitement. But now, after Elisa's performance, he saw something different in their eyes. He saw respect, he saw stillness, and he saw something he had never seen after his own performances: tears. He sat down on a chair and didn't say anything for a while. His friends, who had been laughing and cheering earlier, were now quiet too. One of them whispered that was something else. Another one said she didn't even try to show off, but I felt that in my chest. Ryan didn't respond. His hands, which had felt so powerful on the piano just minutes ago, now felt strange, empty. He remembered how sure he had been of winning, how he had smiled before the duel, thinking it would be fun to embarrass her gently, just to prove he was better. But now, he felt something completely different. Not just surprise, but a kind of shame. The host of the evening walked into the backstage area, smiling politely. "Wonderful performances by both of you," he said. "Thank you for making this event special." Liza nodded and quietly thanked him. Ryan stood up and forced a smile. But something in his chest was heavy as the crowd began to leave the hall. People stopped Eliza in the hallway, shaking her hand and thanking her. "You reminded me of my grandmother's music," one woman said. "I haven't felt this way in years," said an elderly man. "That was more than music. That was healing," whispered a teenage girl. Eliza responded to each person with kindness and humility. She never once bragged. She never said anything negative about Ryan. She only smiled and thanked them for listening. Ryan watched all of this from a distance. He didn't feel angry. He felt something else: confused, lost, and a little empty. For years, he had believed music was about energy, skill, and performance. He had worked so hard to be the fastest, the flashiest, the most entertaining. But tonight, none of that had touched the people the way Eliza's soft, emotional music had. She didn't need lights or followers. Her playing had a power he didn't understand. He walked up to her quietly while she was picking up her handbag.
Oh.
"Mrs. Eliza," he said softly. She turned and smiled warmly. "Yes, Ryan." He looked into her eyes, and for the first time in a long time, he felt small. Not in a bad way, but in a humbling way. I just wanted to say thank you." Eliza tilted her head slightly. "For what?" "For reminding me what music really is," he said. "I've been playing for years, and I've never heard anything like that. You didn't just play a song. You told a story." She nodded slowly. "Music isn't about showing what we can do with our fingers. It's about showing what we carry in our hearts." Ryan swallowed hard. "I think I forgot that somewhere along the way." Eliza gently placed her hand on his arm. "It's never too late to remember." That simple sentence stayed with Ryan the rest of the night. After the event ended, Ryan didn't go out to celebrate. He returned to his hotel room alone. He didn't post on social media. He didn't check how many people had liked his performance video. Instead, he sat at the edge of the bed thinking. He thought about how he had laughed at Eliza's name when he first heard it, how he had smirked when he challenged her, how sure he had been that he would win, and how wrong he had been. Later, that night, Ryan walked down to the hotel lobby where a small piano stood in the corner. It was late, and the place was nearly empty. He sat down quietly and began to play not his usual fast, energetic pieces, but something slower, something he hadn't played in years, a melody he used to practice when he first fell in love with the piano as a child, His fingers moved slower than usual. He wasn't trying to impress anyone. He wasn't recording. He was just playing, really playing. And for the first time in years, he felt something in the music. Not stress, not competition, but peace. Back in her home, Eliza sat in her favorite chair with a warm cup of tea. She didn't think about the applause or the people praising her. She only thought about the music and how lucky she was to still be able to share it. Wanted fame. She only wanted to touch lives, even if just for a moment. And tonight, she had done exactly that, somewhere far away. On a quiet night, two pianists sat at two different pianos. One was a young man who had just begun to understand the true meaning of his gift. The other was an older woman who had always known it. Though they came from different worlds, their music now shared the same truth, that the most powerful notes are not always the loudest. They're the ones played from the heart. Ryan had always believed that success came from being the fastest, the flashiest, and the most noticed. But after the piano duel with Eliza, something inside him started to shift. It wasn't just about losing to Hurt. It was about realizing that he had been chasing the wrong kind of victory all along. That quiet night after the concert, as he sat in the hotel lobby, playing a soft tune on the piano, he remembered what it felt like to truly connect with the music, not for the crowd, not for likes, not for trophies, but for himself. It was a feeling he had almost forgotten. The next morning, Ryan woke up earlier than usual. He looked out of the hotel window and watched the town slowly come to life. It was a small place, nothing like the big cities he was used to, but it felt peaceful. Didn't rush to check his social media or emails. Instead, he picked up his phone and searched for Eliza's address. He didn't know exactly what he was going to say, but he knew he needed to see her again. Eliza was watering her plants when she heard a knock at the door. She opened it to find Ryan standing there looking, a little unsure of himself. "Good morning," he said softly. "Good morning, Ryan," she replied with a smile. "Come in." He stepped inside, noticing how simple and cozy her home was. There were family pictures on the walls, a small bookshelf filled with music sheets, and a vase with fresh flowers on the table. It felt warm, like the kind of place where music came naturally, not forced. "I hope I'm not bothering you," he said, looking around. "Not at all," Eliza replied. "Would you like some tea?" He nodded, and she walked to the kitchen to prepare it. Ryan sat quietly in the living room, his eyes landing on the piano in the corner, which wasn't a grand piano. It wasn't new, but it looked loved, cared for. It had stories in its keys. When Eliza returned with 2 cups of tea, she sat beside him and looked at him kindly. "I wanted to say thank you again," Ryan began. "It's for yesterday, for teaching me something without even trying." Eliza took a sip of her tea and nodded. "You already had the lesson inside you. You just needed a little reminder." "I thought I knew what music was," he continued. "I thought it was about being the best, getting the most attention, impressing people. But after hearing you play, I realized I'd been missing something." Eliza smiled. "Music is like a mirror. It shows people who you are inside. If you fill it only with tricks and speed, that's all people will see. With emotion, with truth, people feel something deeper. They remember it." Ryan looked down at his cup, thinking, "I want to play like that, not just loud, not just fast, but real." "That's a good beginning," she said gently. After a short pause, Ryan asked, "Would you teach me?" Eliza raised her eyebrows slightly. "You want lessons from me?" He chuckled softly. "I know it sounds strange. I've played in competitions, taught at workshops, but I feel like I'm still a beginner in the way that really matters." Thought for a moment and then said, "I can't teach you heart, but I can guide you to find it in yourself." And so the lessons began. Every morning for the next week, Ryan would walk to Eliza's house. They didn't practice scales or complex pieces at first. Instead, Eliza asked him to play old, simple songs, songs from his childhood, songs that had personal meaning. One day she asked him, "Do you remember the first song you ever loved?" He nodded. "It was a lullaby my mother used to sing." "Play it," she said. At first, Ryan felt embarrassed.
Oh.
The tune was simple, not impressive. at all, but as he played it, memories flooded back his mother's gentle voice. The warmth of his childhood home, the nights he fell asleep listening to her sing. When he finished, Eliza looked at him and smiled. "Did you feel that?" He nodded. "Yes. That's the beginning of real music." Another day, she told him to close his eyes and play something without thinking. Don't plan it. Just let your fingers move where your heart tells them to. It felt strange at first, but slowly, he started to play a soft, wandering melody. It didn't follow rules. It didn't have structure, but it had emotion. Eliza listened quietly, not judging, just letting him find his own way. Ryan began to understand that music wasn't about showing off. It was about sharing something personal, something true. And the more he played like that, the more free he felt. One afternoon, as they sat together on the porch, Ryan asked, "Eliza, why don't you perform more often? Why stay hidden when you play like that?" She smiled. "I've had my time on stage. I don't need applause to know my worth. Some people perform to be seen. I play to be heard." He nodded, understanding. Later that week, Eliza took him to a small care home nearby. "We're going to play for them today," she said. Ryan was surprised, but they're not music critics or fans. "That's the point," she replied. "They don't care how fast you play. They care how you make them feel." They set up a small keyboard and began to play together. Soft, old songs, melodies filled with nostalgia and tenderness. The elderly people in the room listened quietly. Some closed their eyes, some smiled. One old man whispered, "I haven't heard that in 40 years. After the session, a nurse came up and said, "You just made their day. Thank you." As they walked out, Ryan felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. Peace. "This," he said quietly, "this is what music is for." Elisa looked at him with a proud smile. "Yes, it is." That evening, Ryan sat alone and wrote a new piece. Not a flashy one, not for a show. Just something from the heart. He called it for Elisa. The next morning, he showed her the sheet. "Would you like to play it with me?" he asked. She took the paper, read it slowly, and said, "I'd be honored." They sat at the piano, together, and played side by side. Two people from different worlds, one young and once arrogant, one older and always humble. Their hands moved across the keys like they had known each other forever, and as the final note faded, Ryan looked at her and said, "You've changed the way I see everything." Eliza smiled. "You changed yourself. I just lit a little candle to guide you." That day, Ryan didn't feel like a competitor, didn't feel like a star. He felt like a student, a musician, for the first time, a true artist. After spending days learning and growing with Eliza, Ryan felt something new blossoming inside him, a deep respect for music, a true understanding of what it meant to connect with people through sound. He no longer thought of music as just a contest or a way to impress others. It had become something much more, a language of the heart. One morning, Eliza received an invitation from a local music festival organizer. They had heard about her and Ryan's story and wanted them to perform together on the main stage. The festival was small, but well known in the area, and it was attended by people who truly loved music for its beauty, not just its fame. Eliza hesitated. She was not used to public performances anymore, and she wasn't sure if she wanted to return to the spotlight. Ryan, however, felt ready and excited. This was their chance to share what they had learned with a wider audience. Eliza agreed, but with one condition. They would perform only songs that had meaning, songs that told a story, songs that came from their hearts. The weeks before the festival were filled with practice. Ryan and Eliza spent hours together, not just playing notes, but exploring emotions, stories, and memories behind the music. Ryan shared pieces he wrote in the past, but Elisa encouraged him to think beyond technique and speed. She helped him slow down, to listen to the silence between the notes, to feel the music rather than just play it. Ryan felt nervous before the performance. This time, there was no challenge or duel, no pressure to prove he was the best. Instead, there was a quiet excitement mixed with vulnerability. He looked at Eliza, who smiled gently and nodded, reminding him that this was about sharing, not competing. When they walked onto the stage, the audience was warm and welcoming. No loud cheers or wild applause greeted them, just a calm, patient silence, waiting for the music to begin. Eliza sat at the piano first and started to play a soft, familiar tune. The melody was simple, but filled with grace. Ryan closed his eyes and let the music wash over him. Then he joined in on a smaller keyboard beside her, adding his own soft notes, weaving his feelings into the song. As they played together, the audience was captivated. They could hear the story of two musicians from different backgrounds, united by their love for the piano. It was a conversation between generations, a bridge built with music. Ryan felt tears come to his eyes. This was what he had been searching for. Not fame, not trophies, not fast fingers, but the power to touch people's hearts, to tell stories without words. After their performance, the crowd stood and clapped not, just politely, but with real appreciation. Some people wiped their eyes. Others smiled broadly, whispering to their neighbors about how beautiful the music was. Backstage, Ryan and Eliza exchanged a look full of quiet joy. They had done something special. In the days that followed, Ryan noticed a change inside himself. He no longer cared about being the best player in competitions. Instead, he wanted to write music that meant something, that could comfort someone on a hard day or bring back a happy memory. He began volunteering at local community centers, playing music for people who needed it most, the elderly, sick children, and those going through tough times. Eliza watched Ryan's transformation with pride. She knew he had found a path that was truly his own, one that went beyond speed and applause. One evening, as they sat by a fire in Eliza's garden, Ryan asked, "Do you ever regret not playing for big crowds or becoming famous?" Eliza shook her head. "I never wanted to be famous. I wanted to be honest. Music gave me that chance." Ryan smiled. "You've taught me that. It's not about how loud you play or how many people watch. It's about how true you are to yourself." Lisa reached out and touched his hand. "Remember, Ryan, that truth will always find its way to the hearts that need it." Years later, Ryan became known not for his speed or showmanship, but for his soul-stirring performances and compositions. He never forgot the lesson Eliza taught him, that music's greatest power lies not in skill alone, but in honesty, kindness, and heart. And Eliza? She continued to play quietly in her small home. It's content that through her music and her kindness, she had changed one young man's life and through him, many more. Their story became a reminder to everyone who heard it. Sometimes the quietest voices hold the greatest strength, and the humblest hearts can teach the loudest lessons.